recognize some of these folks, but why don't you give them a round of applause as they make their way up here. Okay. We got enough room for everybody up here? All right. It's a good-looking group. Okay, so I think what I will do is start with my far left, and we will move on down back to me, and we will have the panelists introduce themselves, say a little bit about the work they do, and what has brought them here to be on this panel today. Does that sound good? All right. Why don't you take us away, Francis?
Thank you, Stacy. I came in last because I thought I could be last here, but
nope.
Turn the table.
Changing up, flipping the script.
Okay, my name is Francis Ticky. My wife Susan and I, we have an organic dairy and crop farm in southeast Iowa. And we process our milk on the farm and we market it all locally in restaurants and grocery stores. But we're also working on using regenerative farming practices on our farm. And that means to rebuild the soil, because that's really a key thing. People don't realize it, but the soil is a tremendous possible sink for carbon. Actually, there's more carbon in the soil today than there is in all of the atmosphere and all of the biosphere, all the plants and all the air. And so but we've lost half our carbon in the soil. So we can put more back in. And I think that's a really exciting possibility, because the soil is the second largest pool or sink for carbon. The ocean is the largest sink, but we don't want to put carbon in the ocean. It acidifies the ocean. We can put carbon in the soil and actually regenerate the soils and have all these beneficial side effects. And maybe we can get into some of them as we go along.
Hi, my name is Molly Crabapple. And thank you so much. I feel so grateful to be here speaking to everyone. I'm an artist and a writer, and for years my work has had a single unifying theme, that if we want to make the world better, we need to understand what's wrong. We need to understand the abusive systems that we live in. Now, this spring, I had the honor of working with Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez to do an animation called A Message from the Future, which is about how the world would look after the societal transformations of the Green New Deal took place. Now, I think at this moment, most of us know the forces that we're up against. Most of us know the incredible power that the enemies of progress have. And I think that what we need is a vision of how the better and more beautiful world might look. And I think that as an artist, what I and what people like me, what artists can do, is we can create a vision of the sort of world that we're fighting for. A world under the Green New Deal, a world where everyone, especially the working class, can live with beauty and with justice.
My name is Michelle Skywalker. I'm from the Omaha Tribe of Nebraska, and I'm the chairwoman of the Native Caucus for the Nebraska Democratic Party. I have been an activist since I was 17 years old. I worked alongside with the late Dr. Frank Lemire in helping shutting down White Clay, Nebraska, that was targeting Native communities with alcohol sale. I answered my calling as a water protector when I went to Standing Rock. So now my mission in life is to always protect the water. I'm here to tell you that we're not just struggling with pipelines in the state of Nebraska. There are other issues that people may not heard about. We are battling Costco chicken farm, trying to build 500 chicken farms in my state of Nebraska that will pollute our water. I'm also, maybe you guys didn't hear about the flooding that happened in my state for 2 weeks, and nobody knew about it, and the news media didn't pick up, or our governor didn't lift a finger until 2 weeks later to declare a state of emergency. No. 75% of my state was flooded. We witnessed houses, farms, livestock being washed away, and nothing for 2 weeks. I'm here to ask you to listen to my voice and understand the urgency that the Native Americans community has been always doing, forced to bring this climate fight to the front. I'm here to talk about how we can support each other.
Hi, everyone. It's amazing to be here. Oh my God. My name's Zena. I'm 23 years old, and I'm with the Sunrise Movement. So today I'm here in my personal capacity. I am part of a movement that has changed the entire political landscape on climate just in this past year. And I remember about a year ago today, I was sitting in my college library, scrolling through Instagram, and I saw this video that was so compelling and theatrical, it looked like it could have come out of Hollywood cinema. And it was a video of what seemed like hundreds of young people storming through the halls of Congress demanding a Green New Deal. And they were confronting face-to-face the most powerful Democrat in Washington. And so I remember thinking two things. The first thing was I had no idea ordinary people could just walk into Congress and confront politicians like that face-to-face. And the second thing I thought was I need to join this movement. So it's been a year, almost a year since that day, and we've done a lot of things alongside other amazing organizations like Youth Climate Strike, Fridays for Future, and Zero Hour, to just name a few. We have made every candidate put forward a climate plan, which is historical. We've created the conditions to have a 7-hour presidential climate forum. We've made the Green New Deal a household name. And just this last Tuesday, we've seen the Green New Deal emerge as the most compelling and convincing political agenda that candidates can run on. And lastly, we've organized across the country, growing from just 20 hubs to 200 in just a mere amount of months. And I'm here today with my Iowa Sunrise Movement, and you guys are doing the hard work on the ground. You are making sure that every young person out here in Iowa is going to be showing up in force in the elections, voting on the Green New Deal. And can I say one more thing?
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't think a year ago today I could have seen youth and politicians working together to put forward a solution that really addresses the climate crisis at the scale that science and justice demand. And so Bernie and AOC and Senator Markey and a growing alliance of politicians are doing so, and Bernie has put forth the most ambitious climate plan that we've seen. So thank you so much for having me here, and I'm really excited to talk with all you panelists.
Thank you. Thank you.
My name is Sheree Ortiz. I'm a retired school teacher, live in Des Moines, lived in Iowa my entire life. After 40 years of teaching, I really didn't know what I was going to do with my retirement years. However, I had this hope in the back of my head and in my heart that I could find an avenue that was resilient and strong and ready to take on business as usual. I was absolutely exhausted and fed up by the current system that I had tried to support, that I had tried to be active in, and it left me cold. It just happened that I was looking around, you know, for something to do, hoping that there was some activist organization. Read a piece in the newspaper about an organization called Iowa CCI. And they said they were going to talk about the bank foreclosures and about Wells Fargo role in it. And I thought, oh my God, because my East Side neighborhood had been devastated by illegal foreclosures. I watched close friends and neighbors being forced out of their homes. And I thought, I'm going to go. I got nothing to lose. So I went, and they did this interesting overview, and they seemed to be very knowledgeable. They seemed to have done a lot of research. And they said to me, because I was new, sure, you want to go with us? We're going to go out to the Wells Fargo mortgage headquarters out in West Des Moines. And I said, well, then what are you going to do? And they said, we're going to occupy their lobby and protest. And I said, I'm all in. I had no idea what that meant or what we would do. We drove out. They threw open the trunk lids, and out came signs. The CEO at that time out there managing the mortgage headquarters, his name was Michael Hyde. And I got the best sign of all. It said, Hyde can't hide. So we went in there and we protested and we chanted, and I was a former coach, and I have a pretty big voice, and we raised our voices to the rafters, and we blew the lid off that atrium, and you know, workers were coming and looking down at us. And I turned to a woman next to me and I said, well, how long do we do this? And she said, well, we don't leave till the police come. It's not a party until they come. And I said, really? And then I thought, hell yes! So that's you know, how I got my start. Once I got involved in the organization, it just got better and better, because you know what? Iowa CCI is full of truth tellers, unafraid to take on corporate self-interest and corporate power. We provide a lot of training and understanding of the political landscape. And before I knew it, I was getting this incredible amount of training, and I began to take all of that angst, all of that frustration and exhaustion, and here I am today being embraced with my people. I want to thank you all for being here, and thank you for giving me an opportunity to speak.
Absolutely. All right. Want to introduce yourself?
Yep. Hi, everybody. Pleased to be here. All my life, I've been an independent, sustainable family farmer. About 25 years ago, I realized, you know what, it's time to fight for our culture and our way of life. Against industrial ag, against the government, which has been bought basically by big money, big industrial ag. I am past president of the Iowa Farmers Union. I'm still on the board. I am on the board of the organization Comparative Markets, a national group. I am on boards and commissions across the country, across the state. I fight and raise hell for family farm agriculture and for the food you people want to eat. And I have a message for Mr. Trump at the moment. Put your thought where your mouth is. Make America great again. Country of origin labeling for meat by America's farmers and ranchers. Why doesn't he do it? All the Democrats, including Sanders, is willing to do it. It's all about country. Should be. And people, exactly. And Iowa has transformed from a family farm system to an industrial ag system. In the meantime, we have some of the worst water quality in the nation. We have extreme depopulation in the rural areas. We have excessive use of antibiotics in animal agriculture. 94% of the people like farmers like me, independent pig farmers, we're gone. You drive in the countryside, you smell them, the big CAFOs, the factory farms. 90% of the meat you buy in the grocery store comes from a factory farm now. Is that what America wants? We, the family farm system of agriculture, were good enough to feed this country for over 200 years. Why do you think they want to get rid of us now? It's all about big money, folks. We need your help to, quite frankly, raise hell to save the family farm, the consumer. I bleed rural and farm, family farm. I bleed for the working people and the consumers. Us family farmers, yep, we take the subsidies. Us little guys in mid-sized family farms, we just go get another job in town. That's how we subsidize ourselves to stay on the farm. So, we're gonna do it this time. We're gonna make a president out of Senator Sanders. Thank you.
All right. Thanks so much.
Thank you all for being here. My name is Ross Gruters. I'm a member of the Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers and Trainmen. I'm also co-chair of Railroad Workers United, a cross-craft organization of railroad workers and their allies. And I serve on the city council of the Des Moines suburb of Pleasant Hill. As a railroad engineer, I know all too well the potential we're leaving on the table with our nation's railroad system. You've heard a lot about passenger trains and high-speed rail zipping across the country from politicians and advocates. But that's just a fraction of the untapped potential in our nation. The real promise of rail, the ambitious promise of rail, the promise that Bernie Sanders will deliver with his Green New Deal plan is a fully electrified, high-capacity freight and passenger system in our country. It's a Swiss Army approach. It does so many things like slashing carbon emissions, creating a jobs boom, putting forth communities that have been exploited by fossil fuel and ensuring that they are lifted up. Revitalizing our rural communities and creating an alliance between working people and environmentalists. I like to think of it as a steel interstate, moving not just our passengers and freight, but also acting as a conduit for the energy that we will produce under a Green New Deal plan. But it's not going to happen on its own. It's going to happen because we're supporting candidates for office like Senator Sanders and Representative Ocasio-Cortez. It's going to happen because we put hundreds more people in office who support this vision. And it's going to happen because the people in this room are going to grow our movement from thousands to millions so that we can achieve this vision.
So I told you folks we have some pretty impressive panelists. So I'm going to start asking some questions now. And Molly, I want to start with you because I watched the video that you referenced in your opening remarks just last night, and I was compelled by it. It was very well done. And so your work is inspiring and educational. What role do you see artists playing in this movement to educate other folks about the climate crisis and the opportunities that are there?
At this moment, what we're facing is a battle of stories. The story that we're being told is that this is the best we can hope for, that we just have to get used to how things are with wildfires burning people's homes in California, with our grandparents in Puerto Rico dying because there's no electricity to power the hospitals that they're in, with droughts and with pinched circumstances. We're being force-fed dystopia and told that we have to be content. Now, artists are storytellers. And we also have a story that we can contribute to the fight for the Green New Deal, the fight that Senator Sanders is the only candidate truly equipped to make. And that's, we can show people what we are fighting for. We can say, no, we deserve better than this. We deserve better than a world where each year the environment gets worse and worse, and we get poorer and poorer. More people are forced to leave their homes, and these migration waves turn people against each other. We can say, no, there is a better way, that we deserve better, that we can create a better and more beautiful world. For me, what art can do for the Green New Deal is it can present that vision of the future.
Thank you for that. Dr. Ticky, I'll go to you next. Everybody here knows that it's important to get to 100% clean power in the next decade or as quickly as we can. But Iowa's an agricultural state, and agriculture is responsible for 9% of all U.S. carbon emissions. What needs to happen for farming communities to adopt the regenerative soil practices that you're working with, and how are we going to get that number down?
Well, first, we need to understand where we came from. We've lost about 60% of our organic carbon in Iowa since we started farming. And worldwide, that's about average. And so we've been deficit spending our ecological capital. Organic matter is about 58% carbon. So what we need to do is start putting carbon in, but we are going the wrong direction. Today's industrial agriculture is still continuing to spew out carbon. If you look around Iowa, now that the crops are coming out, you'll see that it'll be bare all winter. What we need to have is living roots in the soil year-round. We need to have living crops on the land all year round, and that will start to sequester carbon in the soil again. And farmers are doing it. Some farmers are doubling their soil carbon. And if you extrapolate that, we could, if we can increase our soil carbon by 1% to 2% worldwide, we could sequester all the carbon, taking us from 415 parts per million in the atmosphere down to 350 million. But that is a huge order. We need to turn the whole boat around here. We're going in the wrong direction. So we really need some radical change, and I think Bernie Sanders is the one who can do it. Because we can't be fiddling around the margins. We're not going to get anywhere by going in the status quo, the centrist position, and just trying to change a few things. We have to have a fundamental change. And it's going to take policy change. It's going to take research change. We wonder sometimes, well, if Bernie Sanders gets elected, can we change Congress enough to make it happen? But even within the administration, there's a lot that can be done. At USDA, there's a $2 billion research budget every year. Most of that supports industrial agriculture. We turn that around and start supporting regenerative kind of farming. We can turn that all around. The same with conservation. We can do that in the energy department. All those departments, they can do a lot of change just without congressional action, just undoing a lot of what Trump has done. Thank you.
Thank you for that. So I'm going to come back down to Cherie. One of the panelists mentioned CAFOs, and I think everybody here is probably well acquainted to what those are. But as I understand, there were about 700 CAFOs back in 2001, and now there are more than 10,000 CAFOs in Iowa. What impact does this expansion have on our ecosystem, on our environment?
That is a great question. And just before I answer that, I do want to just do a quick shout out. Iowa CCI staff and peeps are out there, and we've got some forms, some petitions for you to sign. and to sign up and join up with us to take on business as usual, corporate ag, corporate banking. Clean water is a huge issue for us. So they're wearing the baseball tees in black and white. Get your hands up there. There's Jack. There's Sebastian. There's Ross. So please do that for us. Okay, back to this important question. The fact of the matter is that we have had an unprecedented explosion in factory farms, in confined animal feeding operations. The impact of that just on our natural resources, our soil, our water, and our air quality has been really devastating. You know, we have in the state of Iowa 750 polluted water bodies right now. We have asked the Iowa DNR for the new report on impaired waterways, and guess what? Have we gotten it? No. We asked for it 6 months ago. Did we get it? No. We asked for it a couple months later. Did we get it? No. We asked for it a month ago. Did we get it? No. But we're not going away. No. We have a right to that information because you know what? You just have to assume, has the number of impaired waterways gotten better? No. Or gotten a whole lot worse? So, you know, we're all sort of victims of this. The problem that we have really with the impaired waterways in the state of Iowa is many of our public waterways can't even be used for their intended purpose. You know, I think it's always a risk if you decide to swim or fish or water ski or whatever. And it's really disappointing when you go to a state park like I did with my family. We had 3 teenagers with us, and they all jump out of the car. Of course, the first thing they want to do is go to the beach. And out of my peripheral vision, I see a sign, beware of possible high bacteria levels. And I have to yell, wait a minute. Do you know what it's like to live for a long weekend with pissed off teenagers?
That ain't right.
Well, you know, the impact of these CAFOs is that they have more manure than they can manage. And so we are having extremes in temperature here in Iowa, like everywhere else. So we go from drought and heat to torrential rain and flooding. And when you are dumping manure, and sometimes double dumping on the same field, and you have soil that no longer has the capacity to absorb that, because it's been stripped over and over again, we have tremendous runoff into our rivers, lakes, and streams. Many of these water bodies we rely on for our drinking water. So in Des Moines, we rely on the Raccoon and the Des Moines River. And it used to be that if one was polluted, we could draw from the other. They're both polluted now. And so Des Moines Water Works was forced to build, just a few years ago, the largest nitrate filtering system in the world. You show me another place on the planet that has more intensive pig production and environmental degradation. And guess who pays for that? We do. They pass those costs on to us. We didn't dump it, we didn't drink it, and we're not going to stop until they clean it up. Now, in this, you know, we have seen our summers be pretty brutal. So on average, we're averaging 5 days of extreme heat. The projection is that is going to change by the year 2050 to 40 days of extreme heat. You know, what that does to us also does to livestock. So we have over 10,000 confined animal pig sites. And these are massive industrial-sized buildings. And these pigs sit in there and they stand and they drink and they eat all day. There's no recreation program director for them. They get very fat very quick, and that's what the farmers want. Because the less they have to feed them, the bigger their profit margin is. And so, you know, these buildings get hot. So this is pig production on an industrial level, huge buildings, and they have huge industrial-sized fans. And they exhaust that air out to keep it circulating. And also the air is so toxic, it would literally kill the pigs if they didn't. Because those pigs are standing above a manure pit, and that manure is percolating into one toxic brew. So they're certainly going to ensure their profit margin, and these pigs, but they don't hesitate to exhaust massive amounts of polluted air out into our communities and neighborhoods. You know, in the state of Iowa, if you were to take a map of the most number of concentrated areas of CAFOs and overlap that with a map that shows the hot zones, the red zones in the state of Iowa, they're almost identical. So tell me who is contributing to our air pollution.
Yeah. So I want to thank you for that. So I want to get Michelle in here to ask a question. We'll go Michelle, we'll get to Chris, Ross, and then Zena. You can close this out. But Michelle, you were, as you mentioned, a protege of the late Dr. Frank Lemire, and you've been involved in a lot of direct action activism. Can you tell us about how you've built momentum in the Native American community, the indigenous communities, for some of these fights, and share some of the lessons for how activists can broaden their coalitions without losing focus on their specific goals?
So just a recap of what White Clay is, because I'm going to assume a lot of people didn't know. White Clay was a town created in 1905 by President Roosevelt as a border town to border South Dakota and Nebraska. Historically, treaties say all reservations has to be dry and no liquor stores can be within 50 miles. White Clay was only a mile apart from the Pine Ridge Ogallala Reservation. And for over 100 years, they only had 15 residents, but 4 off-sale liquor stores. And they sold millions each year, creating murders and sex trafficking. There was no law in this town. Towards the end, like every baby that was born on Pine Ridge 1 out of 4 babies had fetal alcohol syndrome. And so Dr. Frank Lemire took this on over 20 years ago. He stood at the borderline in protest and got arrested. And then he came to us youth to ask for his help. So thank you, youth, for being here, because I was a youth like you guys one time too. And when he came and asked us to help him, I stood with him all these years to help him shut down White Clay. And as the great Frank Lemire would say, there's more work to be done. So there is. So what I learned over these years with him is, what we're battling here, we're battling against money. You know, we're battling against money, but we, the people, can stand up to them. We can. We actually worked with people from the other party, Republicans, because we made it a humanistic issue. We made it a Nebraskan issue. This was liquor genocide. You know, Nebraska shouldn't profit off of that. And we just lost Alan Jacob 2 months before Dr. Frank Lemire. And Alan Jacob was the former president of the Republican Party. And, you know, there was just a handful of us White Clay fighters, right? So all these years, I never bothered to ask Alan what his affiliation was. He was always teasing me about being a Democrat, but I never asked him because I just seen him as a good human being trying to help us with our cause. And that's what you need to look at. We're all going to have differences. We're all going to have different beliefs and values and outlook. But it's the main thing is you want to keep the goal in mind. You know, we fight the Keystone Pipeline XL. We've been doing that for over 10 years. This is the 3rd time it's up again. Our leader, Jane Klebb, has developed a relationship with the farmers and landowners to work with the Native Americans. You know how hard that is? Me being a Native American, I'm helping you. You know, that's my land, you know? But we have established that relationship because we know how important the water is. And we had established that relationship with environmentalists. So it can be done. We all work together to protect our most natural resources, the Ogallala Aquafilter. And here's another example of how we won. Do you hear being today is helping? If you don't think you could run for office, then support someone who's running for office. Any way you can. We do that. The 2 major Democratic cities is Omaha and Lincoln. So we get together and we get people going and we run and we help and volunteer. And last year we got 3 Democrats on our county commission, Lancaster County Commission. And just this week, because we're battling the Costco chicken farms, They want to build 500 farms that are out of state, polluting our water. And so the Lancaster County, where I'm from, they had a hearing. People from Raymond, the city of Raymond, that they want to build this farm out came up, and these farms can hold up to 47,000 chickens, right? And so the people protest, and they said their words, and if it wasn't for us pushing and getting Democrats elected on these seats, we won. We won just that little area, we won, and say no. And it was to the Democrats elected that we worked to get elected. So if you don't think, working on caucuses or working for a campaign doesn't work, it works. Like I said, it took Frank LaMere over 20 years to shut down White Clay. Right now with climate crisis, we need to move faster with this. It's an urgency. I like to say thank you to Bold Iowa. They have worked with indigenous groups as Seed and Sovereignty. So they're a good, perfect example to lead from, to learn how. Because like I said, we have to be good to each other. Not all the time we're going to agree on everything, but we need to stay focused on the main cause. And we can win. So thank you for everyone for being here. Like I said, right now, I just want to one more thing is I just want to point how important it is for people to look what's going on in Nebraska. You guys are suffering what we're about to suffer. Our farmers and landowners went bankruptcy. They lost their lands during the flooding. Like I said, our governor did not help for almost 2 weeks. The mass media did not pick up on it for 2 weeks. And it was Nebraskans that helped each other, and other states helped each other. It was Nebraskans that helped the tribe that got flooded and send supplies. We helped each other out. So, but yeah, well, we got Pete Ricketts is a billionaire governor who wants to put money over people. And as an environmentalist, an activist, and as a Native, I need help because we're trying to put down all kinds of fires. And so if anybody could help me, any organized group want to help with us, we're more welcome to. And also, if anybody want to get a meeting with me with Leonardo DiCaprio and his foundation, I want to meet with Leonardo DiCaprio and his foundation to see if he can help us in Nebraska. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Michelle. So we're going to go Chris, Ross, and Zena. Chris, this one is for you. Michelle mentioned in her comments the number of farmers that have gone bankrupt. And here in Iowa, family farm bankruptcies under Chapter 12 have tripled in the past 3 years. And Iowa farmers hold more debt than farmers in the state of California. What would a Green New Deal mean for farming families who fear corporate agriculture's unfair advantages will drive them off the land they inherited before they can pass it down to their own kids?
Okay, I'll start with a direct answer to your question, and that being the Green New Deal is the best hope to save the family farm since the New Deal of the 30s. Now let's get a little more serious about this. The bankruptcies are rampant. Going up are suicides. The family farm, the farmer, the farm family, because it's a family. It's way past being a business. Our home is our farm. And on a daily basis, the stress level is high. You're fighting the weather. You're fighting the so-called markets. And we're fighting our very own government, which has been compromised and taken over by big-moneyed industrialized agriculture. This needs to be broke up. Farmers, why the bankruptcies? Can't get a profit. Actually, last month, as being a board member of organization Competitive Markets, we threw a huge rally in Omaha, Nebraska. It's about, right now, the flavor is the cattle prices. And we titled the meeting, Stop the Stealing. Family farm ranchers right now are losing $200 per head per cow marketed. The packers, which own them for 2 to 3 days, are making $400 a head. The retailers are making hundreds of dollars. So again, the guy who owns them the longest and does all the hard work loses money and gets screwed. It's called the family farm. 20 years ago, in 1998, they done the same thing to the pig boys. I'm one of them. They dropped the hog prices to 8 cents a pound from 45 cents. You start doing the math on trying to pay the bills. And at the very same time, we were taking $20 a hog. Iowa Beef Process, a packer, was selling 10-pound hams for $20. Now let's think about how the hell the family farm is going to survive. We need somebody like Senator Sanders who's going to stand up, stand out like a bunch of us advocates and advocacy people have done the last 25 years. And I have a message for Mr. Sonny Perdue, who thinks the family farm is going by the wayside and get bigger and get out. We're going to fight like hell for family farm agriculture. And we're going to have the help of the likes of Senator Sanders as being President of the United States, among many others.
All right.
Let's do it, people.
All right.
Let's do
Thank
it.
you. Ross, I understand rail transportation creates 1/3 as much emissions as moving people and goods with cars and planes, and that's before we electrify the system and create that steel interstate that you talked about earlier. What would this railway revolution mean for communities around the country?
Thank you, Stacy. I want to start with, just by show of hands, how many folks in the audience put up your hand if your parents or grandparents or great-grandparents lived on and worked the land here in this country? Now, by show of hands, leave them up there. By show of hands, whose family is still on that land and still farming? That's incredible. That is what we're facing with the chronic depopulation of our rural communities in this state and around the Midwest. And that's exactly what Senator Sanders' Green New Deal plan aims to correct and reverse. Now, I'm not breaking any news to you folks when I share that railroads and energy utilities are regulated monopolies. Unfortunately, they're being regulated to the benefit of Wall Street investors and billionaires. So, to me, I need to ground this in where the idea came from. And we as grassroots railroad activists got together with environmentalists and had some railroad safety conferences around the country. And I saw communities like Richmond, California in the Bay Area, and what the damage was done to that community by the refinery town. I went to Chicago and I saw the coal ash mounds that rained down on poor Black and brown communities. And I saw the struggles that indigenous communities were going through when it came to fighting fossil fuel extraction on their indigenous lands. So what this revitalization looks like is millions of dollars in investments, $600 million in our rail system, another $500 million to electrify those right-of-ways so that we don't have to have the eminent domain fights, and that we can have the communities that are along our rail lines, communities in Iowa like Ottumwa, Creston, Clinton, Mason City, Fort Madison, Fort Dodge, Marshalltown. These small towns can be revitalized, reindustrialized, and we can create millions of jobs, hundreds of thousands of railroad jobs, but millions of jobs around the production and transmission of clean energy on these rail lines. And that's 3 times more efficient today, Stacy, that the railroad is in terms of carbon. If it's electrified, that improves. And if it's electrified, we can also electrify our trucking transportation fleet so that these things can complement each other going forward. If you like what you're hearing in this vision for rail, I want to again give a shout out to the Iowa CCI Action organizers. They've got petitions out there, and they've got these leaflets on solutionary rail and what that vision looks like. You can pick one of those up from them, and there's a QR code on there that you can learn more about what the vision for rail looks like. But in terms of people out there that are fighting for the Green New Deal, there's one person, and we're going to hear from him today, who is putting forth the most ambitious Green New Deal plan, and that's Senator Bernie Sanders.
Thank you, Ross. Okay, Zena, you are going to close us out with this question and your answer. The energy and conviction young people are bringing to this fight today is important, not only to growing momentum for the Green New Deal, but for also ensuring we deliver a just transition into the decade of the Green New Deal. So what does that justice look like? How can it transform our economy, and what role do young people play in this fight to save the planet?
Yeah, so I think the story there begins with 2 pivotal social movements, and that's the environmental justice movement and the labor movement. And they came together to put forward this principle of a just transition. And it said that we need to move our economy away from an extractive one to a regenerative one. And that's an economy that invests in the well-being of workers and in the health of the environment over the exploitation of people and the exploitation of the environment. And so this idea of a just transition is central to any Green New Deal that we're going to bring in. Because what it says is in transitioning to 100% renewable energy and averting the worst effects of climate catastrophe, we're also going to be bringing in a new era of justice and security and democracy to Americans. We're going to make sure that no worker is left behind in this just transition. And we're going to make sure, essentially, that we're establishing a new value system for how we govern America. And so the Green New Deal is this amazing opportunity to not only envision what our new economy looks like, but what those values look like. So think of family, think of justice, think of security, think of what freedom means. To me, freedom means to live a good life. And outside, there were some Trump supporters, they were yelling freedom at me, and I said, I guess we're on the same page because I want freedom to live. And so, if everyone here could close their eyes for a moment and stop what you're doing and just imagine what an economy that's based on relationships and care would look like. In Iowa, I think it might look like bringing economic control back into the hands of family farmers. I think it would look like investing in people who are on the front lines of the climate crisis and using their local knowledge to restore biodiversity. And most of all, I think it would look like creating meaningful and dignified work in service to the mission of repairing and caring for America. And so Right now, this is the first step in a just transition. Right here, all of us today are embodying the type of vision we want because we're listening to each other and we're imagining where imagination seems to have been lost. And so I'll close this out by saying that I personally think the greatest anomaly of the climate crisis is that we can become better people in how we decide to respond. We can become better family members, better neighbors, better people. And so going forward, I think that we just have to fight for imagination, and we have to not compromise for anything that once was conceived as politically impossible, because now it's politically inevitable.
All right. Thank you. Folks, let's hear it for our panel. Okay, so we are going to take a short break. I see we have oversold this room, so I ask that you do me a favor during this short break. If you need to get water, it looks like there's water and food over there along the side. Look around. If there is someone who looks like they could be benefited by sitting in a chair, and you have the ability to stand,
shuffling their feet, people sleeping in their shoes. There's a warning sign on the road ahead. There's a lot of people saying we'd be better off dead. Don't feel like Satan, but I am to them. So I try to forget it any way I can. Keep on rocking the free world. Keep on I said we're ready for change. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Don't you give the people, give it up, give people what they want. Well, don't you know you just ought to give the people, give people what they want. Well, it's about time for things to get better. We want the truth, and no more lies. We want freedom, justice, and equality. I want it for you, and I want it for me. You got to give the people, give it up, give people what they want. Don't you know, you got to give the people, give it up, give people what they want. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah. Better education, now, people want better food to eat. People want better housing. People need money. People need equality. People need understanding. People need freedom. And you better come on. Don't you know you? Come on, give it to them. Give what they want. Better place.
Don't you know, we're talking about a revolution. It sounds like a whisper. Don't you know, we're talking about a revolution. It sounds like a whisper. While they're standing in the welfare lines, crying at the doorsteps of those armies of salvation, wasting time in the unemployment lines, sitting around waiting for a promotion. Don't you know, talking about a revolution sounds whisper. Poor people gonna rise up and get their share. Poor people gonna rise up and take what's theirs. Don't you know you better run, 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 run. Oh, I said you better run, 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 run. 'Cause finally the tables are starting to turn. Talking about a revolution. Yes, finally the tables
executed, skating around, just valley heights, and revolution starts now. Last night a dream that the world had turned around. All our hopes had come to be, and the people gathered around. They offer all what they could bring, and nobody wanted that. Other than a song sing, the revolution starts now. I spent 27 years in this factory. Now the boss man says, hey, you're not what we need. The penguins in the suits, they know nothing but greed. It's a solitary life when you've mouths to feed. But who cares about us? Now I'm back on the streets with my hands held shut. I'm a working man without any work. Well, is this the way it's meant to be? Because I signed on for the American dream. Now I write my name to the welfare scheme. The money in the bank, well, it's history. So take me down to where the worlds collide, and leave me here till I'm satisfied. So let the revolution begin. Now I track these bones across the barren land. The once a city, now an outstretched hand. We can't lose our sense of dignity while the fat-faced cats that bump the creep. Another disappearing neck falls up to sleep while the shirt's on our backseat refugee. So take me down to where the worlds collide, and leave me here till I'm satisfied. There'll come a day when all of us will show we won't be afraid. Although we're crashing, we won't burn. Let the revolution begin. I spent 27 years in this factory. Now the boss man says, hey, you're not what we need. The penguins in the suits, they know nothing but greed. It's a solitary life when you've mouths to feed. So take me down to where the worlds collide, and leave me here till I'm satisfied. Take me down to where the worlds divide, and leave me here. I won't compromise. There'll come a day when all of us will show we won't be afraid. 'Cause from these actions we will grow. So let the revolution begin.
Ah, the bullet train from New York to DC. It always brings me back to when I first started making this commute. In 2019, I was a freshman in the most diverse Congress in history. Up to that point, it was a critical time. I'll never forget the children in our community. They were so inspired to see this new class of politicians who reflected them, navigating the halls of power. It's often said, you can't be what you can't see. And for the first time, they saw themselves. I think there was something similar with the Green New Deal. We knew that we needed to save the planet and that we had all the technology to do it. But people were scared. They said it was too big, too fast, not practical. I think that's because they just couldn't picture it yet. Anyways, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's start with how we got here. 1970. Global warming was happening.
more and more of us understand that because more and more of us are living it and are having direct experience with it. And even if this emergency isn't reflected by people in power, whether it is political power or media power or economic power, we understand that it is true. We understand, as Greta Thunberg so memorably put it, that our house is on fire. So that is what I'm going to talk to you about today. I'm going to talk about fire. So are you feeling fiery? Good. I'm glad you are. Because I want to talk about three different kinds of fire. I want to talk about the fires of climate disruption. I want to talk about the fires of hate that are also surging. And then I want to talk about the most important fire, which is our fire, okay? It is our fire, the fires that we are kindling here in Iowa and across the country and in people's movements like this one that are spreading like wildfire around the world, from Hong Kong to Chile to Lebanon. People's movements that are coming together to put out those other flames, those flames that are both fueled by greed. So are you with me? All right. We got to get through those other two fires first, okay? Those climate fires. And I know you're here because you understand this. You don't need much convincing. And because here in Iowa, you're living it. You're living it with drought, with the disruption of growing patterns. And of course, you are dealing with it with flood after flood after flood. And in other parts of the country, they are dealing with record-breaking hurricane after record-breaking hurricane, pounding them again and again and again, whether it's Florida or Puerto Rico or Texas. And the state of California is once again battling historic wildfires. And just yesterday was 1 year since the Paradise Fire, the Camp Fire, the deadliest fire in the history of the state, which killed 86 people and destroyed around 19,000 structures. So this is just the barest glimpse of a world on fire, where these kinds of disasters are already stealing many thousands upon thousands of lives and forcing millions to leave their homelands. 1 year ago, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change told us that we must keep warming levels below 1.5 degrees Celsius, because we are already seeing this kind of unraveling of our natural systems with just 1 degree warming. And they said that it is technically possible to do with existing technologies, but it is really hard. What they said we had to do is cut global emissions by 45% in just 12 years. And in rich countries like this one, which is the world's largest historical emitter of greenhouse gases, we have to do it even faster, because that is what is fair. So they said it is possible, but in the summary of their report, they said it would take unprecedented, this is a quote from climate scientists, not the Sanders campaign, unprecedented transformation in virtually every aspect of society. And they listed what those are. Transportation, as you heard, right? Of course, energy, of course, building construction and housing, and of course, agriculture. The building blocks of our society are built around fossil fuels. It requires fundamental transformation, not tinkering around the edges with technocratic solutions, right? We have to understand this. And what a Green New Deal says, you saw in that video that we produced, starring our one of our next speakers, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And And of course, illustrated by the absolutely brilliant Molly Crabapple, who we heard from earlier. And it was such a joy to work on that project because it makes it so clear that what we need to do is, if we are going to change virtually every aspect of our society, if we are going to change the building blocks of our society to meet the crisis of climate disruption, then why would we rebuild the building blocks of our society according to the same inequalities, the same pathologies that scar our world right now? If we are rebuilding anyway, why don't we build right? Why don't we build a Green New Deal for everyone? Of course, we understand, right, that when these climate disasters hit, whether it's in Iowa or whether it is in California or whether it is in New Orleans or whether it is Puerto Rico or whether it is Somalia, when these crises hit, it isn't just the weather that makes them lethal, right? It is the intersection of this heavy, unprecedented weather with a public infrastructure that has been allowed to erode and collapse. Maybe it's been attacked by war. Maybe it is because of a legacy of colonialism, as in Puerto Rico. Maybe it is because of racism and neoliberalism and colonialism. But what we know is that these levees, they should have protected New Orleans, and they should be protecting Iowa, and they are breaking because of the systematic neglect of the public sphere that is the legacy of these projects, that is the legacy of the political and economic project that wages war on everything that is collective, that everything that we hold in common, that told us that there is no such thing as society. So of course, that political class that believed in that toxic ideology has utterly failed to rise to the existential challenge that is climate change. They don't believe we can do things together. They believe all we can do is shop for a different world. Of course they have failed, and they are fired. It is our turn now. So we have this very short window to get this done. And it's not just that we're not doing it, right? It's worse than that. It isn't just that we are not dousing the flames. It's that in country after country, including this one's, it is the arsonists who are rising to the highest offices in their land. Trump, Bolsonaro, Modi, Duterte, this whole gang of strongmen around the world. And what do these guys do? They have a playbook, and they share it, and they swap it, right? First of all, they wage war on the idea of objective truth, right? And they wage war on the media and cry fake news and the rest of it, and use these technologies, these new technologies, to spread lies. And what they are so very, very good at doing is defining an in-group in their respective countries, a protected group, right? The real Americans, right? Or the real Indians, or the real Brazilians, whatever it is. And then using these supremacist ideologies, and yes, in this country, it is most certainly white supremacy, and saying, okay, these are the out groups. These are the out groups inside our countries and at the borders trying to get into our countries. And they pit everybody against each other, right? This is what they do so well. And what I think we really have not really grasped yet is how these two fires are related to one another. That it isn't a coincidence that at this moment when the climate crisis becomes impossible to deny, when it is no longer this crisis off in the distance, but is banging down our doors, that at this very moment, these figures who are so expert in the art of division, right, in the craft of spreading hate, come to power in country after country, and they feed off of insecurity. The insecurity that is the legacy of that 40-year or longer project of neoliberal austerity that has attacked labor standards, that has attacked social safety nets, that has spread insecurity like wildfire, and they have said to those in-groups, you will be protected. We will protect you against the people least responsible for this. That is their recipe. But they're also tapping into the ecological fear that we all feel. And look, I don't care if people say that they believe or they don't believe in climate change. I believe that we all know on a cellular level that there is something deeply wrong with our common home. And that is spreading a profound sense of insecurity that is now being exploited by the right? And they are offering their toxic so-called solutions. We will protect you against the other, right? Against the drug dealer, against the rapist, against the criminal, against the invader, right? Do we think it is a coincidence that these two fires are raging at the same time? It is not. It is part of the same phenomenon. And as these strong men turn their populations against each other, that frees them up for the real business at hand, which is pillaging the last remaining protected wildernesses on this planet from the Amazon to the Arctic. That's what they want to do. That's what they're about. And that, of course, fuels those planetary fires, right? When they deforest the Amazon and warm the planet. And that fuels the droughts and the superstorms and the floods, the fires that force millions to flee their arid lands, the fires that intensify armed conflicts, which also fuels migration, displacement, which is then used as fuel for those fires of hate. We are in a cycle now. Do you see this? It fuels the arguments for further militarizing borders and incarcerating migrants and tearing children from their parents. And it's even more frightening than that, because we are now seeing fascist and neo-fascist political figures in Europe, but it's seeping into North America as well, drop the charade of climate change denial and instead cast the global ecological crisis as some kind of divine corrective, a way of cleansing the world of lesser humans. We cannot win this fight without battling white supremacy. The battles have converged. These are the stakes of our historical moment. It is not just about things getting hotter and wetter, though it is about that too. It is about, within this toxic system, things getting meaner and uglier, and an economic system that tells people that they're all on their own and that their neighbor is their enemy, and those feelings of scarcity being used in the context of ecological breakdown to build a more unequal society. You know, and we have seen this as the plot line of every bad disaster film we have ever seen. This is the future we've imagined for ourselves. It's the only future Hollywood can give us. That's why we made that video with Molly Crabapple and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, because we need to imagine a different future so badly, because how are we going to get there if we can't see it? So those are the two fires that we are up against. And here is why we cannot give in to terror and despair. Because we do not live in a time of just two fires, the climate fires and those fires of hate. We live in a time, and I deeply believe this, we live in a time of three fires. There is a third fire, and it is also blazing. It is our fire. The These fires for demanding true climate justice and standing up to all forms of capitalist exploitation that are coming together and converging around the world. And what is so exciting about the Green New Deal is that it is a battle for putting out both of these fires. It is a plan to get our emissions down to zero, to get to 100% renewable energy. But it is also a plan to attack those feelings of insecurity, to put in a floor for people, to say you all have a right to education, to housing, to health care. And this is what spreads scarcity and allows people to feel that they're actually in this together. This is not an add-on. It is not a laundry list of everything the left has ever wanted. This is a holistic vision in a time of overlapping and intersecting crises. Our fires are the fires of the youth climate strikers, who had 7 to 8 million people out in a single week, the largest climate mobilization in the history of this planet. Ours are the fires of the indigenous rights movements who are putting their bodies on the line to stop pipelines and fracking on both sides of the border and protect the Amazon as they have always done. Ours are the fires of the fossil fuel divestment movement. I don't know if you heard this, but last month the University of California system announced that their $80 billion portfolio was going to divest from fossil fuels. That brings the total number of funds of various kinds, pension funds, university endowments, that have committed to divesting to $11 trillion. You'd think that'd be more of a news story. And ours are the fires of the climate justice movement, led predominantly by racialized frontline communities fighting dirty industries and extractive projects in their backyards and their front yards, who created the intellectual framework that is now being called the Green New Deal. And ours are also the fires of the Sunrise Movement, who take their name from that great ball of life-giving fire in the sky, and who put the Green New Deal on the map when you guys occupied the offices of Nancy Pelosi after the midterm election. So yes, the Green New Deal is guided by science, but it also recognizes that in this moment of multiple fires, of overlapping and intersecting crises, we cannot play my crisis is bigger than your crisis. First we save the planet, then we'll deal with racism, then we'll deal with economic inequality with a little, maybe we'll just have a carbon tax. No, this is a plan for the next economy now, and everybody is included. But here's the thing, we are not gonna win the world that we need, not just the world that we want, but the world that we need, if we are kind of sort of in favor of it. We are gonna have to be on fire for it, okay? And that is why I support Bernie Sanders to be the next president of the United States. Because Bernie understands that this is the fight of our lives, and yeah, we are up against powerful forces. And that means we need to organize an incredibly powerful movement to stand up to those forces. I could sit here and tell you why Bernie's Green New Deal plan is better than all the other candidates, and it is, by far, but that is not even the real reason why I support Bernie for president. I support Bernie because there's no point in having a good Green New Deal plan if you're not building the movement to win it. That zero means I'm out of time, right? I couldn't actually see it. Am I out of time? Can someone tell me? All right. All right. I don't know if I'm out of time. I'm just going to end with a little bit more fire for you guys, okay? Now, the kind of fire that we need to find in ourselves is not the fires of destruction and annihilation that we have seen in California, that we have seen in the Amazon, these fires that leave scorched earth behind. Fire is also a life-giving force. And for millennia, indigenous people have used fire to clear away debris, to clear away dead wood and make room for new growth. And the fire clears away the debris and the ash feeds the soil. And it prevents those wildfires that are so destructive. And that is the kind of fire that we need to locate in ourselves so that we can truly be in this moment. We need to clear away whatever debris is standing in our way, is keeping us from being in this fight with everything that we have, because everything is on the line. And we need to clear away the debris on the outside. We need to clear away the debris of the climate change deniers who are still out there, soaked in fossil fuel money, spreading doubt and misinformation in this moment when we cannot afford that. We need a movement that burns bright and hot enough to clear away that debris. And we also need a movement that burns bright and hot enough to burn away the debris of the distractors. All of this distraction coming at us, telling us that everything is more important than this, telling us that we should just follow whatever Trump's latest tweet is, or whatever the latest celebrity gossip is, or whatever it is. We need to clear away the debris of the distractors. And we also need to clear away the debris of the doomers. I don't know if you know who I mean. Some of my friends call them the doomer dudes. These are the people who have sort of turned a fetish into the idea that it's all too late. Right? We're doomed. We're too selfish. All we are is we're just atomized individuals anyway. They've confused human nature with capitalism, and so they tell us we'll never rise to this challenge. We need to clear away the debris of the doomers. And most of all, we need to clear away the debris of the dividers, turning us against one another, pitting us against each other when we need to be more united, more powerful than we have ever been before. We cannot mess this up. We cannot blow this. There are no second chances. And that is why I'm here tonight. In 2016, I supported Bernie by writing a couple of articles, but I kept my distance. I am not keeping my distance now. There is a democratic socialist with a chance of winning this election, running on the Green New Deal of our dreams. So this is not a moment to wait and see which way the wind is blowing. This is the moment to create our own weather. Thanks, my friends.
Please welcome back to the stage Lynn County Supervisor Stacey Walker. All right, let's hear it one more time for Naomi Klein. This room just keeps getting bigger and bigger. I love the energy in this room. I was backstage and I ran into the good Senator Sanders, who you will hear from in a moment. And he mentioned to me, he said, in 2016, I talked a lot about climate change and the environment, and people would nod their heads and say, okay, yeah, sure, that's an issue. But look at where we are right now. Look at this room. He has made this a priority. And so every now and again, you have the privilege of being aware that you are existing in one of those rare moments of history where great challenge meets its match. You know that our great-grandchildren will read of this time that we are in, asking themselves, how did we ever make it? They will say the odds seemed stacked against us, that the idea of cooperation and mass action seemed like a pipe dream. But somehow, some way, there was a spark. And that spark would ignite an entire movement, Millions of people coming together, united around a common cause to save this planet and to make gentle the lives of others. Now, my grandmother often talked about it. She was born in the Deep South near the end of the Second Great War. She grew up witnessing unspeakable horrors. The granddaughter of a slave, she moved north as a young single mom, hoping to find a better life. She would catch the tail end of the life of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. as he worked in Chicago to call attention to the gross injustice of wealth inequality and poor working conditions for those who were fortunate enough to even have a job. He called attention to the plight of the poor and the homeless. My grandmother saw how one man connected the struggles of many seemingly different groups of people with the civil rights movement that was growing stronger by the day. Now, Dr. King was moving beyond unity. As one freedom fighter reminded us yesterday, he was after solidarity. He was willing to fight for someone else because someone had fought for him. My grandmother would adopt me and my sister after we lost our mother to an unsolved homicide when I was 4 years old, and she raised us to be concerned about our neighbors, about our community. She taught us to stand up for what we believed in, to fight for what we knew to be right. She taught us to give more than we took, to work hard, to smile at strangers, to forgive often, and to leave this world a little better than how we found it. Earlier, I talked about being aware that we're in a special moment in time. And the task of leaving this world a little better than how we found it is shaping up to be quite the challenge. But it's not an insurmountable one. Because we have in our very midst a few individuals who have sparked a movement and inspired millions of people to reclaim their power and their country. Ordinary people who have found the courage to meet this moment of challenge with fierce resolve. Robert Kennedy was one of my favorite speechwriters, and in a speech he gave in South Africa, he reminded the audience of how ordinary people, many of them young people, could change the world. And there's this passage where he's going through these folks, and he says, "A young monk began the Protestant Reformation. It was a young general who extended an empire from Macedonia to the borders of the earth. It was a young woman who reclaimed the territory of France, and a 32-year-old Thomas Jefferson who proclaimed that all men are created equal." Now, you can start out anywhere. Anywhere. You can start out even as a bartender in the Bronx. You can start out as a bartender in the Bronx, and you can change this world. And my friends, I have the enormous privilege of introducing to you a woman who frankly needs no introduction, because she is one of the most inspiring political figures of our time. But indulge me for a moment. This third-generation child of the Bronx grew up as no stranger to hard work. She lost her father at a young age, which brought emotional and financial stress to the family. They had to sell their home and make other changes, but they persevered. She worked her way through college, spending time in Senator Ted Kennedy's office. There she would see and hear stories of families being separated by ICE. And she would graduate magna cum laude from Boston University, all while continuing to work as a bartender to support herself and her family. She would go on to volunteer for Senator Sanders in 2016 in the South Bronx. And a few years later, she would take on the establishment and run one of the most inspiring campaigns of my lifetime to win a seat in the United States House of Representatives as the youngest woman in American history to ever do it. This is one bad sister. She's so bad that her initials have become an international symbol of strength and resistance, of power to the people. So, my friends, I want you to stand to your feet and help me bring to the stage Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
To reclaim our future. Because that is what today is all about. That is what this moment is all about. Because it is about how we respond to crisis. And in crisis, some people waver. Some people shrink. Some people choose to bow to cynicism and to give up our future and to say that all hope is lost. That is what a lot of people do in crisis. But the people who change the world are the people who refuse to accept who refuse to accept our decline. They're the people who understand and know that our future is whatever we choose it to be. And I don't know about you, but I refuse and reject and absolutely will not accept the choice of, I refuse to accept the choice of leaving a planet that is diminished and dying to the next generation. I refuse to choose that. And because we refuse to choose that, then what we have no choice to do is to act. We have to act. Because all of us, whether you're here in Iowa or whether you're my family from the Bronx or from Puerto Rico, all of us are being impacted by the climate crisis. Every single one of us. There are folks, almost right after I got sworn in, there was a Republican member that told me that caring about the climate was elitist. Yeah, elitist. As though billionaires aren't buying up their enclaves thinking they can protect themselves from this. What's elitist is thinking this isn't a problem. What is elitist is thinking that you can buy yourself immunity from the floods and the wildfires and the droughts. That is what is elitist. What's elitist is thinking that you can sit on a pile of money and you'll be okay while your neighbors aren't. That is elitist. And it's a bunch of bull. We, so shortly after we got in, and shortly after sworn in, we introduced the Green New Deal resolution. And immediately, the reactions were all over the place. I mean, anyone who has had the misfortune of turning on Fox News understands how fixated they are. And, but it is very powerful, because since then we've had several hearings and we've known and seen almost a conspiracy in a way, because ExxonMobil knew exactly what was happening and exactly what was going to happen in the 1970s. Let's talk about the truth. Let's talk about brass tacks. Because what they did is that they had an inkling that carbon emissions could increase global temperatures to unsustainable levels due to the burning of fossil fuels. They knew this. They had that inkling. So they dumped tons of money in scientific studies in the 1970s. We interviewed and we questioned the scientists ourselves. They had models going back decades predicting 415 parts per million in the year 2019, in the 1970s. And what did they do? Did they change their models? No. Did they change their business? No. Did they sound the alarm? No. No, they dumped millions of dollars in lobbying a campaign of doubt. And that is exactly why we have to acknowledge that the climate crisis is not an accident. Do you really? It is not an accident. It is not a coincidence, it is a consequence. And that is why we need to connect the dots when it comes to the climate crisis. Do you really believe that if oil and gas were not one of the most profitable things in the world, that we would be burning our planet to our destruction? Do you really believe that? Nobody does. Nobody does. The reason we are in this crisis is because oil and gas has been one of the most profitable industries of the modern era. And when we talk about fighting money in politics, what we're talking about is fighting big oil. We're talking about fighting Wall Street. We're talking about fighting big pharma. We're talking about fighting endless wars. That's what fighting big money means. And like we said in New York, when we were running a long shot campaign for Congress against one of the most powerful and wealthy members, is that we've got people and they've got money. But here's the thing about big money, is that big money is very lonely, because we've got people on our side. The thing about billionaires is that there's not too many of them. And the only reason they're able to try to purchase influence in their elections is when people aren't actively coming together and stitching our movements together in order to combat the growth and in order to combat the influence of big money. And like I said last night, let me tell you something. This movement is real. This movement is growing. Don't let anyone convince you that no one cares about climate change. Last night, we were in Council Bluffs, Iowa, and held the largest rally of the presidential cycle last night in Council Bluffs, in Iowa. 2,400 people in Council Bluffs last night to talk about these issues. Because we know, and one of the things that I said last night, is that there's a lot of talk about unity. There's a lot of talk about unity in this moment, but very little talk about what we're unifying under. Because the thing is that Trump is a symptom. He is a symptom of much deeper problems. He didn't fall into the White House. He didn't fall in there. He was elected, which means we've got deeper issues to deal with. because there was a lot of discontent leading up to that moment. So there is no way that we're going to get through this moment without guaranteeing health care to every American. We can't, because here's the thing, is that we can beat him, but we have to vaccinate ourselves against something like this ever happening again. And the way we inoculate ourselves from late-stage, hyper-capitalistic concentration of wealth among the very, very few is with a labor movement. The way we inoculate ourselves from continuing to burn up our planet at unsustainable level, triggering feedback loops that we have not even begun to comprehend, is by honoring indigenous wisdom and allowing it to guide our climate policy. The way that we preserve our systems is by transitioning to principles of universality. That means I want you clothed, I want you educated, I want you paid a living wage, no ifs, ands, or buts. And what that also means, and what Naomi talked about as well, is directly, consciously combating white supremacy in the United States of America. Because I, for the life of me, cannot understand why we get so panicked about terrorist activity all over the world, and we don't seem to recognize it in our own backyard. And I want to talk about this a little bit, because when we first introduced the Green New Deal, we talk about frontline communities. We talk about bringing it straight to communities that were left behind, rural communities, poor communities, Flint, the South Bronx, Baltimore. We talk about putting these communities first, and one of the first things that we heard from folks is just worry about the solar panels, leave the social justice stuff behind, always. And it's funny how that's always the case. We're always telling people, and somehow the big consultants are always telling you, race makes everything complicated. Or talking about poverty makes everything complicated. It was almost a taboo word to talk about poverty in Washington, D.C. The reason for that, and I want to tell you a little story, is one of the things that we know, too, is none of these policies are that new. We have done this before. But let me tell you a little story about how these systems got dismantled. Because we started to treat housing as a right and developing robust, beautiful, invested public housing in the United States. We treated college education as a right. It was free or virtually free to all Americans until when? In New York City, we had a system, CUNY, and it was virtually tuition free. When did they start charging tuition? When schools and colleges began to get integrated. When racial integration came to many of our institutions of higher education, we then started to transitioning to economic discrimination. So when we talk about establishing systems of universality, anti-racism is a very important part of that. Because this idea that, neoliberalism just, et cetera, just dismantled it, what were the tools of that? The tool of that was the myth of the quote-unquote welfare queen, is this idea that I don't want to pay for somebody else, right? But that is coded, that is layered. We're not paying for anybody else. This is for us. We are owning these systems. They are public systems. It's not a handout. We built this. This is ours. There are folks that are trying to completely purchase our political system, running as Republicans and now tossing in their hats as Democrats in the field as well. But what we're here to say is that in a democracy, it shouldn't matter how much money you have. What should matter is whether you vote, whether you caucus, whether you turn out. It's the numbers, it's the people, it's a movement. And when it comes to a Green New Deal, people say, always, always, always with this question of how are you going to pay for it? As though we're not paying for it now. As though the Midwest wasn't underwater this year. As though 3,000 Americans didn't die in Puerto Rico in Hurricane Maria. As though Hurricane Katrina didn't happen. As though sea levels aren't rising. As though California isn't on fire. How do we pay for that? The way we pay for this is with a people-powered movement. We're going to come together, invest our systems, and decide that instead of paying for our destruction, we're going to pay to come together and rebuild this nation. Thank you very much. And with that, I introduce to you our brother, my Theo in this movement, Senator Bernie Sanders.
Whoa! In case you haven't noticed, we got a lot of people here. Let me begin by thanking the panelists who opened up this program and all the work that they have been doing for many years on climate change. Let me thank Representative Jeff Kurtz for being here and for the work he has done. Let me thank one of the great writers in America and a dear and longtime friend of mine, Naomi Klein, for being here. And let me thank one of the great political leaders in the state of Iowa, Stacey Walker, for his remarks. And last but not least, let me thank somebody who has in the last year inspired millions of people to get involved in the political process, Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Stacey Walker, in his remarks, mentioned something that is true, that earlier this afternoon I mentioned to him and some other folks that 4 years ago when I was running around Iowa and New Hampshire and going all over this country, I talked about climate change. And people nodded their heads and they said, yeah, it's a serious problem. I was on a national debate and the moderator said, what do you think is the great national security crisis facing this country? And I said, climate change. People kind of didn't fully appreciate that answer. But the point is that over the last 4 years, as I go around the country today, people do understand the reality of climate change and the danger climate change poses and the need for unprecedented, bold action to address this crisis. I wish from the bottom of my heart, I really do, that I could tell you that, we don't need aggressive, unprecedented action. A little bit of stuff here and a little bit of stuff here, we can solve the problem. But if I told you that, I would be lying to you, and I would be betraying my kids, my 7 grandchildren, and future generations. Brothers and sisters, we have a major global crisis in front of us, and we are going to need unprecedented action in order to address it. The scientists, leading scientists all over the world, have told us that we have fewer than 12 years to act boldly to transform our energy system away from fossil fuels and into energy efficiency and sustainable energy, or our entire planet. I'm not talking about Iowa or Vermont or America. I am talking about the threat to our entire planet. And from a moral perspective, we cannot turn our backs on future generations. We have a moral responsibility to make certain that the planet we leave our children and grandchildren is a planet that is healthy and habitable. That is not a choice. That is what we have got to do. Now, building on the Green New Deal, we have brought forth a rather detailed proposal, and I have been criticized by some who say it is expensive. Well, they're right, it is. It's $16 trillion over a 10-year period. That's a lot of money. But I want you to tell me what the alternative is in terms of saving the planet. There was a piece today in the New York Times, and scientists have been talking about it, good piece in the New York Times today, and it said that the scientific community has underestimated the speed at which climate change is causing havoc in the planet. Underestimated it. So we got a choice out there. Here's the choice. We can listen to people like Trump and the fossil fuel industry who deny the reality of climate change. And as all of you know, I disagree with Trump on everything. That's an understatement. But on this one, he is threatening the well-being not only of our country, but the entire world. So obviously, unlike Trump, we listen to science. That's one. And then there are other people out there who say, well, Bernie, climate change is real, no question about it. But we have to be realistic. We can't spend this much. We can't do that. It's too disruptive. Well, I think when the future of the planet is at stake, we have got to be bold and aggressive. We have got to tell the fossil fuel industry that their short-term profits are not more important than the future of our planet. All of you know, last 5 years, warmest years on record. You know that just this last June and July were the warmest months in history. And despite Donald Trump talking about climate change as a hoax, we are facing an unprecedented threat to our food and water supplies. We are facing incredible threats to major coastal cities all over America and all over the world that threaten to displace hundreds of millions of dollars. Hundreds of millions of people, forget the dollars. And what the scientists are telling us is that great cities like New York City, like Miami, like Hong Kong, cities all over the world could be underwater by the end of the century if we do not get our act together. So what we are here to say is we have an unprecedented global crisis, and the leadership of the United States of America should not be denying that reality. It should be bringing the entire world together to address it. Now, I have a dream. Now, maybe this dream is unrealistic, maybe, but I think it is an imperative, and that is right now, as a planet, countries around the world are spending some $1.8 trillion on weapons of destruction designed to kill each other. We need global leadership coming from the United States of America, which says to Russia and China and Pakistan and India and Brazil and countries all over the world that instead of spending fortunes trying to kill each other, we got to pool our resources against our common enemy, which is climate change. And when I look at the young people here in the Sunrise Movement, and when I look at young people all over the world, this may be the moment when young people look their parents in the eye and say, now is the time to save the planet. Being here in Iowa today, and we can make the same case in every state in this country. But in Iowa, if we do not get our act together, the number of dangerously hot days in this state, where the heat index is 100 degrees or higher, is estimated to jump from 5 days a year today to 40 days a year by 2050. Do you know what that means to the people of the state, to agriculture, to the economy? Scientists expect the number of days above 90 degrees in Iowa to nearly triple by the middle of this century. And let's talk about not only heat and its impact on agriculture or all of our lives or human mortality, let's talk about floods. From the summer of 2018 to the spring of this year, Iowa set a record for rain and snow with over 50 inches of precipitation, the wettest since 1895, causing a record-breaking $2 billion in damages. 7 of the 15 biggest floods in Davenport's history have taken place over the last 10 years. Unless we get our act together, total rainfall in the Cedar River Basin, covering 1/3 of Iowa, is projected to double by 2050 from more intense storms as a result of climate change. And let's be clear, these floods are already causing serious economic pain to Iowa's farmers. In 2013, about 700,000 acres of highly productive Iowa farmland went unplanted because of muddy conditions. In just one spring in 2014, Iowa lost nearly 14 million tons of soil from its cropland due to a series of major storms. This year's flooding and overly wet conditions from climate change meant that over 19 million acres of land were left unplanted throughout the United States. Unless we get our act together, corn yields right here in Iowa are projected to go down by 25% by the year 2050 as a result of intense heat waves, heavy rainfall, and droughts made worse by climate change. And let me tell you about rising sea levels. With the melting of the ice caps in the Antarctica and in Greenland all over this world, in the next 50, 100 years, major cities will be underwater. Since the year 2000, the top 10 natural disasters in this country, including Hurricanes Katrina, Harvey, Maria, and Sandy, cost over $660 billion in damage and over 5,000 human deaths. So that is where we are. We are in a moment in history which is unprecedented, a moment in which the future of the entire planet is at stake, and we have the moral responsibility now to stand up and say, we will save this planet for our children and our grandchildren. And let me tell you what that means. Under a Bernie Sanders administration, we are not going to continue to do as Trump does, and that is give hundreds of billions of dollars in tax breaks and subsidies to the fossil fuel industry. That is going to end. And we are going to make sure that our administration meets the recommendations of climate scientists by moving to 100% renewable energy for electricity and transportation by 2030 and decarbonizing our economy by 2050. And when we do that, by the way, and this is what Alexandria was talking about and others, Naomi was talking about, is we're going to create up to 20 million good-paying jobs. Under the plan that we have brought forth, which is the most comprehensive climate change plan ever brought forth by any presidential candidate, in fact, by any candidate for federal office. We will be making an historic $16.3 trillion investment in sustainable energies like wind and solar. We'll be investing in manufacturing, infrastructure, and research and development. And when we do that, these kinds of investments will be of enormous consequence to the economy of Iowa and the economies of every state in this country. Today, nationally, more than 57,000 farms are taking advantage of renewable energy production, which has more than doubled since 2007. In fact, Iowa now generates about 1/3 of your electricity from wind. Congratulations, Iowa. And that is good, but we have got to do better in Iowa and all over this country. And in order to do that, Our proposal will greatly expand the existing federal power system to provide reliable, affordable electricity for all Americans. In other words, in this moment of crisis, the federal government is going to become heavily involved in the production of sustainable energy. We're not going to beg the corporate world to do it. We're going to have to do it ourselves. We will use our existing energy-producing agencies to expand wind, solar, energy storage, and geothermal power plants, and fully eliminate fossil fuel energy sources. And despite what the fossil fuel industry wants you to believe, the reality is that solar and wind are already cheaper than coal. And I got to tell you that it is really an embarrassment as I go around the country to states like Arizona and Florida, states which have Puerto Rico, places which have enormous potential for solar, and to understand that the fossil fuel industry has fought tooth and nail to prevent these states and territories from moving to solar. Well, when we together are in office, that dynamic is going to change. We will also be investing in energy efficiency so that we get the most out of the energy we are generating. That is the low-hanging fruit. And when we make our buildings and our homes energy efficient, not only do we cut back on carbon emissions, we are going to save people substantial sums of money on their electric bills and their fuel bills. And furthermore, we will build a resilient, secure, and energy-efficient smart grid. And that means requiring that new construction and existing commercial buildings meet tough energy efficiency and electrification standards. And it means aggressively weatherizing homes and businesses in a way that will let us reduce residential energy consumption by 30%. And we will create millions of jobs rebuilding our roads, bridges, and water systems. You know, people of America deserve to know that when you turn on the water faucet in your home, that water is not toxic. And we will protect the right of all workers to form a union without threats of intimidation from the corporate elite. Now, I would not be telling you the truth if I were to tell you that all of this is easy. And to be political for a moment, is look, what we are trying to do here in this campaign is not only defeat Trump, what we are trying to do is to transform this country. And what we understand and why the message of our campaign is us, not me, is we understand perhaps uniquely of all the presidential candidates that no president of the United States, not the most honest and well-intentioned, can do it alone. And what Alexandria was talking about, and what our campaign is about, is the need to build an unprecedented grassroots movement of working people, black and white and Latino, Native American, Asian American, gay, straight, immigrant, native born. And we need that movement. We need that movement because if anybody here thinks that taking on the greed and the corruption of the corporate elite is going to be easy, you're wrong. I'm a United States Senator, and I deal with these guys every single day. They have extraordinary power. We're fighting for a Medicare for all single-payer system. And right now, because the industry made $100 billion in profits last year, they have endless amounts of money to spend on TV ads right here in Iowa, lying about what Medicare for all will do. We're taking on Wall Street, who are charging you 20, 25, 30% interest rates on your credit card. We're taking on the pharmaceutical industry, which is charging us the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs. We're taking on the military-industrial complex. Which supports endless wars because they make money from endless wars. We're taking on the prison industrial complex because we're going to do away with private prisons and detention centers in this country. And we're going to take on the whole damn 1% and make them start paying their fair share of taxes. I say all that, I say that to you because this is an unprecedented campaign. I'm not running just to be president. I'm not running just to beat the most dangerous president in history. I am running with your help to transform this country so that finally we have an economy, an energy system, a government that works for all of us, not just wealthy campaign contributors. So our campaign, and I want you to understand this. Do you think that as president, I sit down with the fossil fuel industry and I say, hey guys, as Naomi was saying before and others were saying, you have known for decades that the product, the carbon you are producing is destroying this planet. Stop it. Be nice guys. Be responsible citizens. Do the right thing. Move your resources to energy efficiency and sustainable energy. And you think these guys are going to say, Bernie, you made a very convincing argument. We hadn't thought of that before. Wow, why didn't we think of that? Yeah, tomorrow, that's what we're going to do. We're getting out of oil and gas and coal. No more fracking. We're going to start investing in solar and wind. It doesn't happen like that. The only way that real change ever takes place, has ever taken place, is when millions of people stand up and are prepared to fight for justice. That is the history of the labor movement in America. It is the history of the civil rights movement in America. It is the history of the women's movement in America. It is the history of the gay rights movement in this country. And that is where we are right now. That is where we are right now at an unprecedented moment, not only in terms of climate change, but in terms of this country moving to an oligarchic form of society. So today, what we are saying to the fossil fuel industry in particular, but to the entire corporate elite, This country and our future belong to all of us, not just a handful of billionaires. And the struggle that we are waging is not just for you or you or you. This is for our kids and future generations. This is a struggle we cannot afford to lose. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. And now let me bring back to the stage Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Alexandria. Okay, oh, wow, it's loud. I think we have a process in which we're going to take some questions. Is that the plan? Okay. Okay, we got a microphone over there. Then we got about a half hour of questions. Is that the only mic we got?
There's 3 mics.
Or we got 3 mics.
Oh, one right here?
Raise your hand where the
right
mics
there.
are. One there?
1, 2, 3.
One there,
4.
1 there. Okay, that's it.
5.
Okay, so we got about a half hour for questions. Probably give us your name, make them short. And if they're really, really hard questions, address them to Alexandria. Okay, let's start right here. No, we'll start right there and then we'll head this way. Okay, we've got a question right there. Yeah, sir, your name and question.
Hello, my name's...
You gotta get into that mic,
It's with
sir.
the microphone right there.
Hey, it works now. Hi, my name's Will, and I have a question for either of you. Part of the nature of the Green New Deal involves removing or replacing certain industries, such as the healthcare industry. What would you say to workers who are currently entrenched in those, who may not be able to transition to any of the new manufacturing or construction jobs you're trying to create?
You're right. When you're talking about major transformation, there is no question that some people are going to be losing their jobs, while many others are going to be gaining new employment. For example, in terms of the Green New Deal, we estimate that we can create 20 million new good-paying jobs, which is a lot more than the jobs we're going to lose. And in terms of healthcare as well as climate, what we have built in to both of those proposals are billions and billions of dollars for a just transition. To say to that worker, look, we are not anti-worker. Alexandria and I have 100% voting records for unions and workers. All right, that's what we do. And we will do our best to make sure that you have at least, in the case of the Green New Deal, 5 years of transition, of income, of health care, and of job training to make sure that you're going to be able to get another good-paying job.
Absolutely.
So that is an obligation that we have. Alexandria, you want to add to
Yeah,
that?
and one thing that I'd also like to note as well is that this is not a plan that we're making for other industries. We've got workers from those industries at the table helping plan a just transition. In fact, one of my favorite examples of this is our brothers and sisters who are coal miners, particularly in regions like Appalachia. And what they're dealing with right now in the current conditions is that a lot of these fossil fuel jobs are quite extractive, not just from the earth, but from people and workers as well. And so right now, coal miners are being denied their pensions while coal barons are being bailed out by the federal government. And that has got to end. So part of a just transition is committing to courses of action like bailing out and fully funding coal miners' pensions so that we can get to that next level and make sure that their children, their grandchildren don't have to be exposed to jobs that imperil their lives and put them at higher risks of cancer and other diseases.
Okay, name and question, please.
My name is Autumn. I am a transgender and gender nonconforming activist here at Drake. I'm with Sunrise.
Woo! Sunrise! Yeah!
And with who I am, I don't really get the choice whether or not I get to be fully invested in this movement. So my question for you is, there's a lot of people who seem to be on the fence and just don't want to be hurt anymore by massive amounts of disappointment. So my question to you is, how do you get people to fully allow themselves to believe and take the risk of fully investing in this movement?
Good question. Look, what the system does, essentially, to all of you, to me, it says you are powerless people. Doesn't matter what you think, what you want, what you believe to be true. It doesn't matter. You have no power at all. The real power rests with very, very wealthy people who control the economy and the political life of our country. Why do you want to vote? Why are you here? You're powerless. It doesn't matter. What this campaign is about is turning that equation on its head. And it ain't easy. I'm not here to tell you it is easy. What the system tells you is that the only change that we can have in America is tiny incremental change. Big change can't happen. And what this campaign is about is saying that if we stand together and we do not allow Trump and his friends to divide us up based on the color of our skin or where we were born or our sexual orientation or our religion, if we stand together and have the courage to have a new vision for America, we can succeed. Now, I'm not telling you this is easy. It is not easy. But what we believe is not good enough to just defeat Trump. I think, Alexandria, you said Trump is a symptom of the problem. I agree. What we need is a dynamic democracy. A democracy where all of us play a role in shaping public policy. Not some billionaire who decides that he wants to run for president of the United States because he's a billionaire.
I'd also say, you know, on an individual level, and this is something I talked about last night in Council Bluffs as well, is that last February, I was bartending downtown in Union Square in Manhattan. Last February. And, you know, I went through that process because I worked in restaurants for years. And I had a moment where I tuned out from this system. It just hurt too much. Because at the core, politics at its best is about love. It's about how much we love each other. Really, that's what good politics is. It's about us choosing as a nation and as leaders and as organizers to love our communities and to love each other and to treat each other as ourselves. And so when you elect a politician and then they let you down, it feels like rejection. It feels like heartbreak. It feels like betrayal. And it feels like I never want to love again. That's what that feels like. And so I understand how that feels because I felt that way. But you know what happens when you say, I never want to love again? Your heart gets black, and you turn angry, and you get very anxious. And when I say that there was something that Trump kind of latched onto, it was that. And so but you know what, and I remember I would wake up in the morning and I'd feel very anxious, and I'd say, no one in this system is fighting for me. What is the point? And you just wake up just carrying this weight, this emotional weight. You know when I stopped feeling that way? When I started doing something about it. That's when I stopped feeling that way. It didn't make a lot of sense. I didn't know what I was doing at the time. But when I started going to rallies for Black Lives Matter, I felt better about myself. because I started standing up for my neighbors, centering my neighbors, putting them first. When we decided to just hop in our car, have no idea what we were doing, but a friend of mine was a harmony keeper at Standing Rock, and I said, hey, what do you need? Can I send you a blanket? Can I do a coat drive for you? She said, we need women to come to camp. What day are you getting here? And you know what? I had no idea what I was doing, and people told me I was crazy, and they said it was a bad idea. They said it's not your place. I got into like a 98 Subaru with some friends, and the cigarette lighter was broken, so we couldn't charge our phones on the way. And we drove there, and that anxiety lifted. Because even though I wasn't sure, as just a normal person, that showing up there alone, that one action would change everything, I do know that if enough people did that, it would be part of changing something much more fundamental in our society. And so to the person that says, I don't know if I want to trust anyone else and have my heart broken again, what I have to say to that is that no one politician is going to save this planet. It's not going to happen. The only way that anxiety goes away is if we all choose as an individual to show up every day. We got to show up. And that's how this whole thing changes. That's how we turn the ship around. Okay, so we're going to go here and then there.
Okay, I think we did 1, 2, 3.
No.
Let's go to the... Oh, skipped you. I'm sorry. Okay, yes.
Don't think this is, oh, is it on? Okay. My name is Lucas Figueroa, and I would like to ask this on behalf of my centrist and libertarian friends who did not come with me to this. They are on the fence about a lot of things, but their main questions are questioning the term socialism because they associate it with totalitarian dictatorships. And although I think everyone here understands that you don't advocate for that, I'd like you to put that to words, as well as what are your views on firearms as they relate to the mass shooting crisis?
Okay, you've raised a lot of questions. I'll do my best to briefly answer them. I'll tell you what democratic socialism means to me. It means a vibrant democracy where we overturn Citizens United and billionaires don't buy elections. It means understanding, as is the case already in many countries around the world, that economic rights are human rights. Okay? I live 50 miles away in Burlington, Vermont from the Canadian border. And in Canada, anybody goes to any doctor they want. You're in the hospital for a month. You do not get a bill because healthcare is a human right, not a privilege. And because they don't have insurance companies and drug companies making massive profits, they spend 50% per capita on healthcare as much as we do. 50%. So democratic socialism means to me that your right to get a higher education, regardless of your income, is a human right. Housing is a human right. That we must address the obscene level of income and wealth inequality, where 3 people now own more wealth than the bottom half of American society. I have spent, to answer part of your question, I have spent my entire life fighting totalitarianism, whether it is left or right. I believe in democracy, one person, one vote. And in terms of guns, what I believe is we need gun policy in this country which is developed by the American people, not the National Rifle Association. Alexandra, you want to add?
I'd say one thing, too, is first of all, if your friends are concerned with authoritarianism, they should be concerned with the occupant of the White House right now.
And if authoritarianism is truly a concern, then we should look at what's happening right now with a president that ignores the rule of law, that uses the power of our government to extort foreign governments to intervene in our elections. When we talk about caging innocent babies in our border, when we talk about stripping people's civil rights, ending democracy in America, that is what we should be concerned about when it comes to authoritarianism. That's what we should be concerned about. So for any American that is concerned about authoritarianism and the concentration of power and the abuse of power in America, just look at what's happening with denying people the right to vote in the South, in Georgia, in North Carolina, in South Carolina. So if you want to be worried about combating authoritarianism in America, vote Democrat in 2020. Aside from that, when it comes to values of democratic socialism, democracy, it's really about, at the core, democracy. Democracy in our republic is a profoundly good thing. The more we center back into democratic principles, the better our governance becomes. One person, one vote. Eliminating the role of big money in politics is for democracy. Now, if democracy is positive for our governance and our collective decision-making, what we're arguing for is to expand principles of democracy into our economy and to our workplace, which means you shouldn't check your rights at the door when you go to work. That's what this means. That's what this means. So democracy, economic democracy, is the right to health care. Economic democracy is the right to unionize your workplace. Economic democracy is a living wage. And that is what we are fighting for. And for anyone who's concerned about the abuse of power, we should be looking at the abuse of power of corporations deciding who lives and who dies depending on how expensive a medication is. So when we fight for economic rights, what we're doing here today is fighting for an advanced society. Because we've got two choices. We're going to go forward or we're going to go backwards. But we cannot stay the same. We cannot tolerate the status quo for another 4, 8, 10, 20 years. How many people will pass away if we do that? We have to be courageous.
Okay.
Hello. Hi. How do you plan to deal with...
Your name, please?
Oh, sorry. My name's Colby. I'm from Arkansas.
Okay.
Yeah, woo big. How do you plan to deal with increasing automation in the workforce where the lowest paid are losing their jobs to more and more machines?
Well, that is an issue, I think. Everyone hear the question? Question about the impact of automation and robotics and artificial intelligence on our economy, and it is a huge issue. And I'll tell you how one way that we deal with it. I deal with it through a federal guaranteed jobs program. See, I happen to believe there is a massive amount of work in all aspects of our society that needs to be done. We need to rebuild our child care and pre-K system. We need hundreds of thousands of well-paid, well-trained teachers to work with the little kids. We need to create the best public school system in the world, which means we need many of you to go into teaching, and you deserve to be respected and well-paid. We need great professors in colleges, not adjunct professors who are getting ripped off and can't get tenure. We need to rebuild our crumbling infrastructure. We need to transform our energy system. Medicare for all will open the door to health care for all, meaning more jobs in health care. As we transform our energy system, we create up to 20 million good-paying jobs. So, bottom line is, I believe that in America, if somebody wants to work, we should make sure that they have a good, meaningful, union paying job. That's how we deal with that.
Yeah. One thing that I'd also say is automation is seen as a threat if you have a zero-sum understanding of jobs in America. Is that there's only X amount of jobs, and if these are getting automated, then there's less jobs for all of us. But as the senator said, that's simply not true. It's that we need to rebuild our infrastructure. We need to save our planet. We need to take care of an aging generation so that people can age with dignity. We need to put America to work. We got a lot of work to do, a lot. And so what we just need to do is invest in our systems to expand them, to put this country to work in becoming a robust 21st century society again. And that's going to take a full economic mobilization. And that is an expansion and a rejection of the idea that there's only so much to go around. This is America. We don't believe in that. I don't believe in that here. I believe in an expanding pie and a nation that rests in principles of growth. And that's what this is about, growth.
Okay, Alexandria and I are going to have to move down the road. We're going to rally tonight. But I want to take maybe briefly 1, 2, 3, 4 more questions, okay? So that's about it, guys. That's all we're going to be able to do. Yes, sir, into the microphone.
Thank you, Mr. Senator. I consider, my name is Muhammad Suleiman. I am Syrian. I am a veteran political prisoner, political prisoner in Syria before. I consider myself now the most privileged Syrian activist to address the most real democratic candidate who is looking after humanity in general. I consider myself most privileged. And I will request you to be patient with me. I have 2 questions, okay, about Syria, about your statement, about democratic candidate statement about Syria, about foreign policy. Can I ask you? Sure. You and Mr. Biden has already before confirmed that the United States is the strongest nation in the world. You did that, and Mr. Biden did that. But Mr. Biden, when he was a vice president, he was commenting on the sound line of Mr. Obama that strong nations don't bluff. And you also described the dictator in Bashar al-Assad as the top of the most vicious dictator in the world, and he has to go. Now, my question to you, according to Washington Post survey with the Democratic candidate, asking you, will you be ready to reopen diplomatic relations with the dictator? And you said you are open to it. According to them, I don't know. Maybe they misquoted you. My second question, we don't want interference from any foreign country in our country. We didn't want that before. Now we are asking why the strongest nation in the world don't activate the United Nations principle right to protect. Nobody talk about it. And you mentioned something about it in your pledge to ask the world community to cooperate to solve the problem. It cannot be solved, as you said, while Assad is staying in the regime. This is the problem. Thank you, sir.
You've asked a complicated question. Syria has been a disaster. People are suffering. Assad is, in fact, a horrific dictator. I don't think anyone has a magical solution, but what we do need to do is to bring the United Nations and countries in the region together to try to address the many crises facing Syria today. But let me go on the record. Yeah, I do think Assad is a horrific dictator, and we got to work with democratic forces, which probably will not happen tomorrow, to end that dictatorship. Okay, gentleman right here. Yeah.
I'm Jan Flora. I'm from Ames, and I wanted to ask a question about Puerto Rico.
Good.
Puerto Rico, it seems to me, is a microcosm of a lot of the issues that we've been talking about in terms of imperialism, climate change, racism, and corporate greed. And I wanted to take advantage of Alexandria's presence here to see how being a Puerto Rican had shaped her and how the issues in Puerto Rico relate to the larger issues we're dealing with in this country.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you for that question. I grew up amongst a lot of different backdrops and landscapes. I grew up going to public school in the suburbs of New York City. I was born in the Bronx, and my dad was trying to start a small business there. The rest of my family was there. But I also grew up spending a lot of my time with my family in Puerto Rico during the summers. My parents couldn't afford childcare during the summers when school let out. And so I spent a lot of my summers growing up with my family in Puerto Rico. And I think you have a really strong point, and you are exactly right when you say that what's happening in Puerto Rico is exemplary of a lot of different systems, a lot of different broken ideologies that has led to this point. It's not a coincidence that 3,000 people died in Hurricane Maria on the island. My own grandfather passed away in the aftermath of the storm. And it's not just because a big storm hit the island. The vast majority of those deaths happened afterwards due to lack of infrastructure, crumbling, the nebulous legal relationship between the federal government and U.S. territories, the fact that thousands and thousands of Puerto Ricans have served in the United States military but don't get the right to vote for a president that will send them abroad. That's colonialism. That's what colonialism looks like. The fact that you can live on an island and be subject to another government without having democratic say in that government, that's colonialism. And it's not just Puerto Rico, it's Guam, it's the US Virgin Islands. There are millions of Americans that are essentially being governed under a colonial relationship. And if we want to know why billions of dollars have been denied and why we haven't been able to do that, is because because of that basic broken relationship. And so when it comes to status, that's why it's very important that we fight for full binding self-determination of Puerto Ricans, which means not just a plebiscite and then we ignore the results, but it means you allow for a full and free election, and no matter what the results are, the United States honors it, and we as a federal government honor it. Because what keeps happening is that whenever the island votes, when the federal government doesn't like how they voted, it gets ignored. Or sometimes there's conditions put on. Last time there was a plebiscite, Republicans tried to change make the official language of Puerto Rico English as a precondition of honoring any results. So that is what colonialism looks and sounds like. And if we really want to believe that our fight is each other's fight, we have to fight for the full respect of another person's vote. And when we talk about one person, one vote, it's the same thing. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
I just got warned that I thought we were going to be done, so I got really scared. My name is Cassie Jean Wittenbaugh. I'm from Des Moines, Iowa. 37 years old, registered victim of assault. I know a few of you in this room. I'm an advocate in court. I didn't vote for this person who is in office. I find it incredibly interesting how we don't refer to him as his nomenclature president and we just say his name. He's not my president. My question, and I won't take up too much of your time because I respect every single one of the people who is in here, who showed up. So thank you to all of you. I just met the gentleman behind me. I don't know who he is. His name is Nathaniel. And he has a cane. I have PTSD, right? And I'm college educated, and I placed for adoption when I was 25. It's an open adoption. I was 6 months along when I found out. She's 12. In 6 years, she's gonna be able to talk to me. We're gonna be able to have that conversation, those hard decisions, right? My question is, what do I tell her when it's her turn to vote? And if we haven't done anything, and all she has to rely upon is high fructose corn syrup, aspartame, horrible agriculture, swine flu, tariffs in China, tell me, if we're gonna do something now, and it's not about how, maybe our Earth is just recycling itself and we're gonna have another ice age, what are we gonna do in 6 years? Because in 6 years, that woman could be our president.
I get into too much trouble for that.
Well, I'll tell you what I think. And one of the nightmares that I have, if I can extrapolate a little bit from your question, is that as somebody who has 4 kids and 7 grandchildren, 20 years from now, if we don't deal with climate change, among other issues, I do not want those kids looking me in the eye and say, Grandpa, what did you do when the scientists told you what was going to happen? Why didn't you act? All right? So I want you to be able to tell your daughter and to tell everybody else that you listened to the scientists, that you acted on principles of justice, and that you did everything humanly possible to stand up to the ugliness and the greed and the corruption which currently exists. I want you to be able to say that to your daughter. Alexandra?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a tough question. I know that when I was running in my primary, there were a lot of people who would ask me, before the primary happened, and it was a long shot, and we were looking like we were gonna lose. And people would come to me and they were like, so what happens if you don't win? They would tell me that all the time. They'd ask me, like, what's your plan? And really, I didn't have one, because all I was focused on in that moment was doing what needed to be done today. And so I don't have an answer for you on what we tell our children if we failed, because all of my heart and all of my mind is focused on not letting that become a reality. On not letting that become a reality. And that's how we all need to operate. We cannot, there is no plan B, there is no planet B. We have to operate like, we have to wake up every morning, what do I have to give today? And sometimes you wake up in the morning and the thing that you have to give is to take care of yourself. Sometimes the thing you need to do is wake up and say, I'm gonna go to bed, I'm gonna sleep, I'm gonna take care of myself. But sometimes you wake up, you can say, I'm gonna knock on 5 doors today. I'm gonna text my cousin. I'm going to go to my community meeting, because we have to wake up, and no matter what it is that we have to do in a day, we need to do it so that we don't think about what could have been. I do not want to think about what could have been. I want to look back and be proud of what we did.
Okay. Very last question, ma'am. I guess so. Yep. Get close to that mic if you could, please.
Oh, I think
is there a
she's
mic there?
missing one. Okay, I'll listen to you. Okay, here you go.
All right, there you go.
Okay, hi. I've never been to Iowa. I'm from the East Coast. My name is Fanny Mandelberger. I'm a child of Holocaust survivor parents. So my question is, my mom's gonna be 96, she's pretty amazing, and she voted in the last election. And I'm trying to get the building, I'm an occupational therapist, so I see the suffering and the indignation. You talk about dignity as we age. I'm 63 now, right? So I'm concerned about this for me and my patients. So I have 2 comments and questions. In my family, and I don't want to say their names, when I said I was coming here, to really hear about how we're going to do that Medicare, because on a daily basis on the ground, I see how Medicaid is not getting the same as Medicare. I just found out that my supervisor is part of the Westboro, if you don't know about that, extremist family. And as a Jewish slash, yeah, I'll try to be brief. Jewish, it's hard, New Yorker, you know. Jewish slash gay, gender fluid person. Difficult, but how to have compassion for someone that's different than you. So in my family, there's this question that I was coming here and saying, and I don't know how to say it without being disrespectful, do you know that these two candidates are anti-Semitic and self-hating Jew? And I don't, and that's not my reality, but these are people I love and respect, and they're bright. And I guess I know that supporting Israel or supporting, having equanimity in all worlds that we coexist is the answer. But how can I go back to them with education?
You tell them that my father's family was wiped out by Hitler, that I am proud to be Jewish, and the last thing in the world that I am is an anti-Semite, obviously. But you can also tell them that support for Israel, and I believe 100% in Israel's right to exist in peace and security, that support for Israel does not mean you support Netanyahu and his racist government. And it also means that you can support Israel and support the Palestinian people. And that is what we are trying to do. All right? So I don't, want to hear from people who think that I am an anti-Semite. That is disgusting and an insult. But to say that we believe that we can create peace in the region, and the United States can play an important role in bringing the Israelis and the Palestinians together to find solutions that work for both people, that is what we're trying to do. All right. Let me, I want to thank all of you for coming out. Alexandria and I got to hit the road, or else we're going to be late. That we had so many people coming out for a conference on climate change. Us, that you understand the severity of the crisis. We got an enormous amount of work to do. Let's go forward together. Thank you all very much.